Welcome.
Well, I simply just said we are getting rid of that convertible and there won't be another.
Shit!
Boys, we got some shit going down.
You're gonna tell me about Doc Gaston's operation. We got a fucking ton of shit coming in by boat. I'll tell you where. Here on out, I call the shots.
Mafia 2 wasn't quite the best example of an open world game. It felt like the beautifully crafted environments were just window dressing for what was a decently told, albeit typical mob story. For all the hard work put into creating the game's setting, 2K Czech did little to justify exploring that expansive world. Instead, Mafia 2 felt like a single player game in an open world body, and that just didn't fit in any way. But that's enough about Mafia 2. Let's talk Mafia 3. You play as Lincoln Clay, an African-American Vietnam vet returning from the war to New Orleans' facsimile New Bordeaux. He's quickly roped into low-key criminal enterprise until New Bordeaux's biggest Italian mob reach out for partnering up on the score of a lifetime. Once the job is pulled off, Lincoln and his friends are quickly double-crossed by their former partners, leaving everyone but our protagonist 6 feet under. After recovering from his injuries, Lincoln vows to take down the traitors by picking away at each piece of their operation one by one. And without spoiling anything, that's pretty much how Mafia 3 plays out. The mix of documentary and archive footage helps set the tone for a very by-the-numbers revenge arc, but having that lens pull back to interviews and briefings help keep you in the know and the story going at a good pace without any kind of bogged-down exposition. But there's lost potential in using this method. At no point had I felt Lincoln or his partners were in any kind of danger or faced any worthy adversity. For the most powerful mob in New Bordeaux, you'd think the antagonists could muster up some kind of fight outside of the hit squad sent at you at random throughout the world. There is an attempt at creating a secondary force for Lincoln to square off against, but in the end it's underutilized to the nth degree. Taking on the mob alone isn't an option. Lincoln seeks help in the heads of various other gangs that have grown tired of the dominant Italian mob, including protagonist of Mafia 2, Vito Scaletta. Brushing shoulders with the lieutenants and contacts of every mob has its own reward, as each character has their own stories, personalities and views that exemplify the high standard of character writing and voice acting the previous game was acclaimed for. Both story and civilian characters speak from experience of the world around them, from issues with family, race, sexual identity and morality in such a authentically believable way you can tell the writers poured over each one of them with plenty of detail. The use of identity in games is typically one poorly handled in my opinion. We saw this year's Deus Ex Mankind Divided take racial tension and jam it down our throats with its dull story. We've seen the likes of the Grand Theft Auto series take the stereotypes perpetuated by pop culture and just blow them into the stratosphere. We've even seen this game's predecessor reuse Hollywood's perspective of Italian-American mobster stories and go whole hog with its characters and the situations they find themselves in. But Mafia 3 doesn't just use the setting and main character as a crutch for its story, it integrates it into just even the most base level mechanics. Police, civilians, shop owners and mobsters all react to Lincoln's race in different ways that paint a more grounded picture than using his skin colour as some sort of gimmick. It took me longer than I care to admit to notice that when police saw you as you passed by, they weren't reacting with uncomfort due to Lincoln Clay being a wanted criminal. They noticed him as a black man. Police response times are slower in the poorer, blacker neighbourhoods of New Bordeaux, and it was actually a very sobering moment amidst all the fun I was having with the game to realise that. Certain shops will have a no colours sign in the window, and if you enter the business, the owner will follow you around and urge you that your kind aren't welcome in here. Continuing to ignore his remarks will lead him to calling the police, and that's just an example of why I like Hangar 13's approach to a southern 1960s setting. Being black isn't a crux of Lincoln's character arc, it's just part of who he is. It's a point of reference for a lot of characters, but mostly in a pejorative sense. I think as risky as this sort of business can be, Hangar 13 handled it with a deft touch that I've rarely seen in all my years of playing games. Mafia 3 tackles the previous game's lacking open world by using its own for pretty much everything you do. Lincoln aims to take out pieces of the mob one by one to leave the head honchos isolated in what I could only describe as a system similar to the licensed Godfather games. Each district of New Bordeaux has rackets under control by the mob's lieutenants. With the help of Lincoln's shady wartime CIA friend, you collect intel on the illegal comings and goings through said districts. Planting wiretaps on phone lines allow you to take down transports of cash or assets valuable to the racket in question. Shaking down informants by driving dangerously or gunning down enforcers out in the open also serve to damage the operation. Eventually, the racket bosses will come looking for answers, leaving them vulnerable to an assault. Personally, my favourite approach was calling in my very own hit squad of psychopaths to clear out buildings while I called in a telephone operator to cut the phone lines, preventing nearby civilians from calling the police. It's easy to tell whomever was in charge to put together the environments players would explore had fun coming up with new ideas. Train yards, office buildings, factories, warehouses, distilleries and slaughterhouses are among the many kinds of areas you'll carve bloody paths through as you mow down hordes of gun-toting mobsters in what I can only describe as unnervingly gratifying brutal combat. Once you reach and disarm the racket boss, you can execute him for quick cash or recruit him and increase the racket's earn for when your people move in. And that's when the underboss and perk systems come in. What I like about Mafia 3's perk system is how everything you gain from giving your underbosses turf keep you moving in a way I don't feel like a lot of open world games do. Calling in a vehicle drop off or an arms dealer to show up with a van full of weaponry go long ways in keeping your momentum going after large gunfights or story missions. Giving your underbosses control of entire districts will upgrade existing perks with small benefits, like a more powerful hit squad or speed and handling upgrades for Lincoln's muscle car. You can play it safe and evenly distribute turf amongst your crew, or risk being betrayed if you take control of their rackets away by giving the entire district to another gang multiple times. The underboss system is cool in concept, but it's woefully underused. You can attain most perk upgrades by playing it safe, and the only purpose of favouring one underboss over the other is at some point personal preference of character. And that covers about everything you do in Mafia 3, for better or worse. After completing it at the roughly 30-hour mark, it's not hard to admit the repetitious structure doesn't somewhat bog down the latter third of the narrative. You'll have mowed down hundreds of mobsters, shaken down your fair share of informants, and blown up enough illegal goods to whet your appetite, and then some. Other than that, I think my only other outstanding issue with Mafia 3 is its lack of technical polish. Occasional physics and lighting glitches with a handful of crashes were among my woes, but that was kind of it. In the end, Mafia 3 is exactly the kind of evolution from its predecessor I didn't know I wanted. The revenge tale of Lincoln Clay is one teeming with excellent writing, characters and style. While the structure of the open world might exhaust you by the final portions of the game, it's not hard to be so enthralled by the unique setting's authenticity and explosive action all the way through. I give Mafia 3 a 4 out of 5.